You're late. The words cut through the air like a blade, sharp and unyielding. The woman standing in the doorway froze, her hand still gripping the doorknob. Her face, pale, drawn, and etched with years of bitterness, twitched as she met the gaze of the woman behind the desk. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice trembling. The traffic was. Save it. The younger woman leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her. Her eyes, cold and calculating, never left the older woman's face. You're here now. That's what matters. The room was silent for a moment, the tension so thick it could have been sliced with a knife. The older woman, Linda, shifted uncomfortably, her heels sinking into the plush carpet. She glanced around the office, taking in the sleek modern furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city, and the subtle scent of expensive perfume that lingered in the air. It was a far cry from the cramped, dingy apartment she'd called home for the past decade. Sit, the younger woman commanded, gesturing to the chair across from her. Linda hesitated, then obeyed, lowering herself into the seat with all the grace of a wounded animal. She kept her eyes downcast, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Look at me, the younger woman said, her voice soft but firm. Linda's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. She met the gaze of the woman who had once been her stepdaughter, the girl she had tormented, belittled, and abused for years. But this was no longer the timid, cowering child she remembered. This was Evelyn Carter, CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the country. This was a woman who had clawed her way to the top, leaving everyone who had ever doubted her, or hurt her, in the dust. And now, she held Linda's fate in her hands. Do you know why you're here? Evelyn asked, her tone deceptively calm. Linda swallowed hard. Because you offered me a job. Evelyn's lips curved into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. That's right. I did. And do you know why I did that? Linda shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. Because I wanted to see this, Evelyn said, leaning forward slightly. I wanted to see you sitting there, squirming under my gaze. I wanted to see the woman who made my life a living hell reduced to this. Linda flinched, her cheeks burning with shame. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. You don't get to apologize, Evelyn continued, her voice hardening. Not now. Not after everything you did. You don't get to wipe the slate clean with a few hollow words. No, Linda. You're going to earn your redemption. Every single day, you're going to prove to me that you're worth keeping around. Linda nodded quickly, tears welling up in her eyes. I understand. Good, Evelyn said, leaning back again. Because if you step even a toe out of line, I won't hesitate to fire you. And trust me, Linda, you don't want that. Because if I fire you, you'll have nothing. No job, no references, no future. Just the memory of what you lost. The thread hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Linda felt like she couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in around her. Now, Evelyn said, her tone shifting to something almost businesslike, let's go over your duties. You'll be my personal assistant. That means you'll handle my schedule, manage my correspondence, and make sure my every need is met. You'll be available 24/7. If I call you at 3 a.m., you answer. If I need something done immediately, you drop everything and do it. Understood? Linda nodded again, her throat too tight to speak. Good, Evelyn said, standing up and walking around the desk. She stopped in front of Linda, looking down at her with an expression that was impossible to read. One more thing. Linda looked up at her, her heart racing. You'll address me as Ms. Carter from now on, Evelyn said, her voice low and steady. Not Evelyn. Not honey. Not sweetie. Ms. Carter. Got it? Yes, Ms. Carter, Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. Evelyn smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good. Now get to work. Linda stood up on shaky legs and turned to leave, but Evelyn's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Oh, and Linda?" She turned back, her stomach churning with dread. "Welcome to your new life." The door clicked shut behind her, and Linda leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. She closed her eyes, but all she could see was Evelyn's face, cold, unyielding, and utterly in control. It was going to be a long road ahead. Evelyn watched the door close behind Linda, a small smile playing on her lips. She walked back to her desk and sat down, her mind already racing with plans for the future. This was just the beginning. She picked up her phone and dialed a number, waiting for the person on the other end to pick up. "It's done," she said when they answered. "She's mine now." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a low chuckle. "You sure you can handle this?" "It's not going to be easy." Evelyn's smile widened. "Oh, I can handle it. Trust me." She hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair, staring out at the city skyline. This was going to be fun. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. The city lights outside cast a soft glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but the room itself was dim, lit only by the warm amber light of Evelyn's desk lamp. She sat in her leather chair, legs crossed, her sharp eyes fixed on the door. Her fingers tapped lightly on the armrest, a rhythm that betrayed her impatience. When the door finally creaked open, Linda stepped inside, her posture stiff, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, her once vibrant features now softened by time and stress. But there was still a flicker of something in her eyes, something Evelyn couldn't quite place. Fear? Regret? Or maybe just exhaustion? "You're late," Evelyn said, her voice cool and measured. She didn't raise it, but the words carried enough weight to make Linda flinch. "I'm sorry," Linda murmured, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't realize you'd still be here." Evelyn leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. "Didn't realize? Or didn't care?" She let the question hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Sit down." Linda hesitated, then moved toward the chair across from Evelyn's desk. But before she could sit, Evelyn raised a hand. "Not there. On your knees." Linda froze, her eyes widening. "What?" "You heard me." Evelyn's voice was calm, almost casual, but there was an edge to it that made Linda's stomach twist. "On your knees. Now." For a moment, Linda looked like she might argue. Her lips parted, her hands twitched at her sides, but then she seemed to think better of it. Slowly, awkwardly, she lowered herself to the floor, her knees pressing into the plush carpet. She kept her head down, her hands resting on her thighs, but Evelyn could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers clenched into fists. "Good," Evelyn said, leaning back in her chair. "Now, apologize." Linda's head snapped up, confusion etched across her face. "Apologize? For what?" Evelyn's lips curved into a small, cold smile. "For everything. For the way you treated me. For the things you said. For the way you made me feel like I was nothing." Her voice remained steady, but there was a flicker of something darker beneath the surface, something that made Linda's breath catch. Linda swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Evelyn, I don't know what you want me to say." "Say you're sorry," Evelyn said, her tone sharpening. "Mean it." There was a long pause as Linda struggled to find the words. Her mind raced, trying to piece together what Evelyn wanted from her, what she needed to do to survive this. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Evelyn tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Sorry for what?" Linda's hands trembled as she forced herself to continue. For the way I treated you. For the things I said. For making you feel like you were nothing." Evelyn nodded slowly, as if considering the words. "And do you mean it?" Linda hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I mean it." Evelyn leaned forward again, her eyes locking onto Linda's. "Prove it." Linda blinked, confusion creeping back into her expression. Prove it? How? Evelyn's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. By showing me you're willing to change. By doing exactly what I say, when I say it. She paused, letting the words sink in. Starting now. Linda's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for Evelyn's next move. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken tension. Evelyn stood, circling the desk until she was standing in front of Linda, looking down at her with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and control. Stand up, Evelyn said. Linda obeyed, rising to her feet with shaky legs. She kept her eyes downcast, unable to meet Evelyn's gaze. Look at me, Evelyn commanded. Reluctantly, Linda raised her head, her eyes meeting Evelyn's. There was something unsettling about the way Evelyn looked at her, like she was seeing straight through her, peeling back layers Linda had spent years trying to hide. Do you remember what you used to say to me? Evelyn asked, her voice low and deliberate. Do you remember the names you called me? The way you made me feel like I was worthless? Linda's cheeks burned with shame. Yes, she whispered. Say them, Evelyn said. Linda's eyes widened in horror. What? Say the names, Evelyn repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Say them to my face. Linda shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I can't. Evelyn took a step closer, her presence overwhelming. You can. And you will. Linda's breath came in shallow gasps as she struggled to find the words. Her mind screamed at her to refuse, to run, but something in Evelyn's gaze held her in place. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, You were ungrateful. A burden. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that might have been pain, or maybe just satisfaction. Go on. Linda swallowed hard, forcing herself to continue. You were selfish. A waste of space. Evelyn nodded slowly, as if encouraging her to keep going. And? Linda's voice broke as she spoke the final word. A mistake. The room fell silent, the weight of the words hanging in the air between them. Evelyn studied Linda for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Linda's face, her touch surprisingly gentle. Good, Evelyn said softly. Now you know how it feels. Linda's breath caught in her throat as she stared at Evelyn, her mind reeling. She wanted to say something, to apologize again, to beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. Evelyn stepped back, her demeanor shifting back to its usual cool composure. You can go now, she said, turning away from Linda and walking back to her desk. But remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to be powerless. Linda stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out of the office, her legs trembling with every step. As the door closed behind her, Evelyn sat back down in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. This was just the beginning.